To me, it traces back to you want energy for your kids, right? You want
Yeah,
them to have
absolutely.
access. It, Energy unlocks so many possibilities, but also if you think about gender equality, electricity is huge for that, right? If you look at who is hand washing clothes right now when they don't have access to electricity, typically falls on females, right? Also access to education and other possibilities. So to me, you want electricity and energy. Okay.
Just because the facts are A, if the narrative is B and everyone believes the narrative, then B is what matters. But it's our job in our industry to speak up proudly, soberly, and to engage people in this dialogue. Those 2.5 billion people that are in energy poverty, they need us.
America cannot meet this threat alone.
If there is a single country,
of course, the world cannot meet it without America.
that is willing to
We're going to need you, the next generation, to finish the
overhaul
job.
nuclear regulation
We need scientists to design new
and
fuels.
focus on net public
We need
benefits
engineers to invent new technologies. We
over absurd levels of radiation
need
protection,
entrepreneurs to sell those
then
technologies.
we will march towards this.
We need workers to operate assembly lines that hum with high-tech,
where
zero-carbon
we have
components.
unlimited prosperity for all humans.
We need diplomats and businessmen and women and Peace Corps volunteers to help developing nations skip past the dirty phase of development and transition to sustainable sources of energy. In other words, we need you.
Okay, welcome to another episode of the Fire Division podcast. My name is Mark Heineman, and I'm joined today by Amanda Leng. She is the president of NAYGN, which is North American Young Generation in Nuclear. Amanda, how you doing? We're stoked to talk to you.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun conversation, I can tell. We chatted a little bit before we started recording and hope to keep this natural and fun. So I want to talk about NAYGN and what it is and your role there, but you're also
A senior product analyst at Duke Energy. So my career, I've been in the nuclear industry 9.5 years, almost 10. And my bachelor's and master's is in nuclear engineering. And so I was a core design engineer, so designing the reactor fuel for about 8 years, and then recently transitioned into more of an analyst role, looking at
Excellent.
the broader energy portfolio at Duke Energy.
That's awesome. Did you do a concurrent bachelor's, master's?
Yes. So I went to University of Wisconsin-Madison, and they offered at the time a dual degree program, so you could overlap. I think it was like 4 or 5 credits, and so it was all in one go. Yeah, so
I
5
did
years.
the same thing, mechanical at CU. Actually, I've got my CU shirt on today.
Okay,
so.
very cool. Yeah. I know some people go back while they're working, and my gosh, tons of respect for them. That would be tough.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Oh man, couldn't do that. So why did you come to nuclear? What fascinated you about it? What motivated you to get a degree?
Yeah, so it really dates back to maybe like middle school time frame. I had a project where I was looking at different electricity sources. And so, if you look at global energy needs, energy poverty is still an issue, right? There are a lot of people around the globe who don't have access to electricity. And so to me, it was really important that everybody have access to electricity. It makes quality of life so much better, right? Access to education, the internet, amazing things, right? But you have to balance that with the impact on the environment. And so if you look at, you have fossil fuels, you have renewables, you have nuclear, and what are some of the pros and cons there? Really the best in terms of energy density, availability, reliability, and carbon free, you kind of end up at nuclear. And I will say I was probably
You found this in
influenced.
middle school?
Well, yes, this is middle school, Amanda.
Well done.
Came to
Touche.
this
Yeah,
conclusion.
there's some people that go their whole lives and don't discover this. So.
Yeah. I will say I was influenced. I had a very good physics teacher in high school. She happened to be my mother as well. So there was a little bit of push there to go into physics.
Friends of the family, right?
Yes. And math was my favorite subject, and physics is the mathiest of the sciences. So it really aligned with my strengths, and it provided kind of that drive and that purpose for going into the field. So yeah, I've always been very, or not always, but almost my entire life been very interested in nuclear technology. And another big draw for me was I wasn't entirely sure what my career would look like, obviously, when you're in your teens and whatnot. But if you go into studying nuclear, you can actually go into a there's two pretty distinct fields and you don't have to decide freshman year, right? So there's power, which is where I ended up. Electricity, there's a lot of research. You could go to national labs and that kind of thing, but there's also this branch of nuclear medicine. And so to me, that was also really appealing. I ended up not going that route, but it's there. There were several of my classmates who went on to medical school and that kind of application of the technology. So for something that's so niche, there's actually like a variety of careers within the subject matter.
And I love your woman working in the field, right? Working in STEM, a very technical discipline, and your mother promoted it to you. So this is a little unusual, I'll say, but something that comes to mind was in a recent hearing in Colorado, there were a bunch of people testifying for a pro-nuclear bill. And one of the people that were testifying against it was saying, how could you ever want your mother or be a mother near a nuclear power plant? Who would actually want to work near a nuclear power plant and work in one? And so I'm curious on your perspective on that. Offer a counterpoint.
Yeah. So again, to me, it traces back to you want energy for your kids, right? You want them to have access. Energy unlocks so many possibilities, but also if you think about gender equality, is huge for that, right? If you look at who is hand washing clothes right now when they don't have access to electricity, typically falls on females, right? Also access to education and other possibilities. So to me, you want electricity and energy. Okay. So we've established that. Now, what are your options? And your options are, I want the lowest impact on the environment and the safest. And nuclear is the safest. Even compared to something like solar, nuclear actually, if you look at the by energy or by electricity output. Yes. Yeah. So it's very much, and it's tough because there's a lot of misconceptions around this. And to your point, females and women in general are typically more anti-nuclear than the general population. And one of the past presidents of NAYGN actually went on to found Mothers for Nuclear, which is another nonprofit. They're in California, so they focus on saving Diablo Canyon, which they were recently had a great success there, and they were able to extend the life of that nuclear plant. But making connections to that audience is so key because, again, to your point, like there's a lot of sentiment of not in my backyard. So NIMBY is the acronym. But really, when it comes down to it, nuclear is carbon free. We have so many safeguards in place, and it's really such a cool technology. But there is so many misconceptions about radiation, and a lot of that comes from Hollywood and, that type of thing. So I'm happy to go into it. Whoever has questions any time of day, you can reach out.
Well, we'll list you as a resource if people want to get educated about it. So what does a core designer do, and what does a product analyst do? Give me a little bit of perspective on those roles.
Good question. So core design, you are modeling the fuel. So neutronics is the study of reactor physics, so the neutrons and how they interact in the reactor core. So a nuclear reactor is refueled every 18 months to 2 years. We shut down the reactor. It takes about a month, and you take out a third of the fuel and you put a new third in and you rearrange it. And so that rearrangement, that's what I was doing. And so it's a lot of energy, right? You can power it's about 1 million homes, for 2 years. So you have to, how do you get the most out of that fuel? And how do you make sure there aren't any hot spots? How do you, maximize economics? And you do all of that modeling. And so it's a big, obviously you're working on it pretty much the entire 2 years leading up to the fuel reload. And so you come up with the design, you do a lot of iterations on developing the pattern where you place the assemblies, and you're looking at different characteristics like enrichment and also the burnable poisons and over the lifetime of the core. And so you come up with all these designs, you pick the best couple, and then you defend it to management kind of. It's called a review board at my company. And so that was a big step. And then after you do that, you have to formalize all the analysis. And so that takes several months on top of that.
This is fascinating to me. In my mind, I would have envisioned that you just have the same geometry during every refueling, and it's a standard process. These rods have been in for this amount of time. Take them out. You take these, put new ones over here and shuffle them. And what's the feedback loop to understand how you need to make any changes?
Yeah, so there's a lot that goes into it. One of the
that's too deep or too technical, right?
Let me know if I'm going too far down the rabbit hole. But this is really, I love this area. So there's a lot of different variability within the core design. One of the key is the energy requirements, so the length of the fuel cycle. So maybe you have one fuel cycle that's 25 months or 23 months. And so you can, if it's 23 months, you could take out a little bit of enrichment, which saves energy. But then you also have to look over what was the carryover. So remember, I said 2/3 of that fuel is carryover from the cycle previously or 2 cycles ago. And so, this
is like replacing one battery in a device that uses 3 AAA batteries, right?
Yes. Only there's actually like 200 batteries, and you can configure them in all different ways. And then the new batteries coming in, you can pick what those look like. Not like look like, but you can pick how much energy they have. And
meaning you said enrichment level, right? That's the percentage of U-235 that's actually in each rod.
Yes. So it's uranium-235 is what we use in the beginning of cycle to get energy out of. And then late in cycle, we actually have, even in our reactors nowadays, you get some uranium-238 that converts to plutonium, and we actually make energy out of that as well. So, but yeah, back to what you were saying, enrichment is just the ratio of those two isotopes. So uranium-235 to uranium-238.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes more sense to me now. The power usage and how much fissioning of the fuel you've actually had in each of these rods over time can influence, the total burn up, and then you analyze it and understand how to optimize it. So that's cool. But what about a product analyst?
So as a product analyst, I'm on a durable, agile Scrum team. So it's a little bit more in the IT realm, and we're working on designing a dashboard. And it's actually to show our energy portfolio at Duke Energy, and also increase our communication and our feedback loop with distributed energy resources is the area that I'm supporting right now. And so what that looks like is we are going back and forth with lots of plant information data, our generation, our load, getting the third-party solar farms and their data in as well, forecasting them, trying to determine, when we're going to have solar energy, when we aren't. And so I'm kind of the product analyst supporting the product owner on that team. And the overall goal is to help Duke Energy meet its carbon goals for 2050.
Gotcha. That's awesome. I think we could talk for an hour about both of these roles. And I'm sure it's really awesome, but I want to hit on NAYGN, and I'm sure we'll touch on some of the other stuff along the way. But tell us about, North American Young Generation Nuclear. What is this? You're the standing president?
Correct. I'm president until the end of June.
Okay, great. So tell me about the organization and what you guys do.
Yeah, so NAYGN, we were founded in 1999. You could be of any age to join the young generation in nuclear. We do reserve the highest leadership positions for those who are in the early part of their career. And the reason for that is in the 90s and the 2000s, there's kind of this double hump curve in the nuclear industry. So there were a lot of people who were in their very early part of their career and a second portion in the very late part of their career. And so there was kind of this gap, and there wasn't much of a bridge to give you leadership opportunities. So, all the leadership opportunities went to people who had been in the industry for 40 years. And so this was kind of okay, how do we bridge this? How do we give some people leadership opportunities? And from there, it really evolved. And so now we have 4 pillars professional development. So we offer webinars, whether they be on fission, fusion, soft skills development. We also have our annual conference, and we're going to bring together several hundred young people in the nuclear industry and all learn about various topics. We have several awesome keynotes from Isodope, who is a nuclear energy influencer, to Miss America, who happens to be a nuclear engineering student at University of Wisconsin-Madison. So very cool. And then another pillar is public information. So that's the one that I would actually started out my interest in NAYGN in. I think if I hadn't been a nuclear engineer, I'd be a teacher. So I love going to schools, talking to kids. We do student outreach, but we also do government outreach. So we have Hill Days where we go and we talk to politicians about nuclear energy, about what benefits it can bring to their constituents. And then we also focus on networking. So making connections outside of your company, across the industry. And our fourth pillar is knowledge transfer and retention. So right now, a lot of focus is on retaining talent in the nuclear industry, recruiting more people to the nuclear industry, and that kind of arena. A lot of that is focused on our benchmarking and career report, which we release every 2 years. That was a lot.
That's awesome. It was a lot. We can dive in a little bit on each of those. Let's start with the conference. You guys are doing the conference this year. It's one of the first times that you've done it.
Yeah, so normally in the past, we have had a combined conference. So this is our first standalone conference, and we're very excited about that because we can provide 2 whole days of content to our members, and we're already at, lots of people have signed up, more than last year at our combined conference. So we are very excited for this. We're going to incorporate different aspects. It's in Minneapolis.
Nice. But Minneapolis in June. And just in case this, someone's listening after June 2023, the conference is going to be in June 2023. So if you're listening to this afterwards, then you missed it.
But they can still sign up online. It's free to be a member of NAYGN. So they can sign up online and join us next year.
Perfect. Do you guys anticipate to continue doing this and hosting it?
Yeah, that is the plan. So we will always have an annual conference, and right now we're focused on doing a standalone this year and next year as well.
Awesome. You guys it's free to sign up, so no membership dues. How are you funded otherwise? Is it donations and sponsorships?
It is donations. So we promote the value of NAYGN to the companies in the nuclear industry. And then we have sponsorship levels with them. And one of our most recent sponsors is actually Anthropocene, and they are a nonprofit who focuses on climate change. And so they were very generous and came on board. And so we're very excited about that. And that's really one of the big drivers for why we've focused on clean energy so much recently. So we have a new committee that was started back in the summer. So it's almost a year old. But that committee focuses on clean energy. And so what that means is we, as nuclear energy professionals, go out and attend clean energy conferences where the focus is normally on solar and wind, maybe a little bit of hydro in there. But then we show up and we say, hey, did you know nuclear is carbon free? Did you know all these fun facts about nuclear? So it's really fun.
That's so awesome. The American Nuclear Society has a shirt, or they're selling it at their retail store. I've wanted to go to a solar conference to, wear it a little sarcastically, but it has 2 pictures of cooling towers and kind of stars and moon, and then in big font says all night long, which I just find hilarious. But that's awesome. Going to educate people kind of at these other renewable conferences.
Yeah. And our big approach, or our target for this is really, we don't want to say nuclear 100%, right? We want to say we need all of the tools in our tool belt to solve climate change, right? So wind and solar have an important role to play, but I think nuclear can really help get you there. And so with it being base load, so the trouble with intermittent sources is electricity is a pretty unique commodity, right? It's oftentimes produced and consumed instantaneously. If you don't want to do that, you have to store it. lots of losses when you convert energy, and then you have to convert it back. So you convert it from electrical to chemical energy in a battery and convert it back, or you do pumped hydro, something like that. So the most efficient way is to actually you have to meet load at the same time, right? And so you have to have variable power output to meet that demand. And so that's why nuclear can be so instrumental if we really want to do deep decarbonization, which the globe needs right now.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys have a lot of committees. Tell me about some of the committees and how they're structured and what purpose they serve.
Sure, yeah. So there's lots of different opportunities to get involved. In PD, PD is professional development. We have the webinar lead. So they're putting together various webinars on like a monthly or bi-monthly basis for our members. We just had one on fusion, and there's one on SMRs coming up. And we
These
partnered.
are free webinars that people can sign up for anywhere and get educated and learn about the technology. And
Yeah. So anybody can join. They're pretty fun, interactive, and the ones that we did the past 2 months, we've partnered with the young generation in nuclear in the UK. And so we've kind of done a comparison of across the pond, so comparing those two technologies and how they're different in the different countries. So that's one branch. You can also get involved in public information. So we have a couple folks who focus on student outreach. So we have contests for kids, visit classrooms. They can participate in the contest, get prizes, that kind of thing. Government outreach, where we're focused on legislation supporting nuclear energy. And then we also have some folks who work on the younger kids. So, and children's books on nuclear energy. So that was something that I was involved in, the first children's book on nuclear energy that NAYGN did. And that really was a big influencer in why I got more involved in the organization.
And you say the first. How many of these do you guys have?
There are 3 right now.
Awesome. And are they free? Can you buy them? Can you download them?
So right now, they are free. The electronic version is free. And it's in the works. We'll soon have a print to order type feature. We did limited release on Amazon, and so they're all sold out on Amazon now. But we need to set up a more,
Yeah, you guys need a publisher behind you. Like
we do.
Sell a bunch of these, and it'd go towards funding the organization. And
Yes, we need to set that up a little bit
business
better.
Opportunity.
Because it's funny that
nuclear educators, not book publishers.
Yeah. It's definitely not my area of expertise, but it was such a fun project and it was wildly successful. And it was so funny because a couple of them were bought by like third parties and then they resold them on Amazon after the initial stockpile was depleted, and they were selling them for like ridiculous prices. And I was laughing because I was like, oh my gosh, like $100 for a children's book. This is ridiculous. But
one of my mentors, has written a children's book, and I was like, "Why?" And she's like, "Because I'm a capitalist, and there's a demand in it." That's funny. Let's circle back to some of these influencers and people that are participating in NAYGN and the young people. The age gap is interesting, and I find it interesting that exists in several industries. It also exists in oil and gas. So although because of several of the downturns in oil and gas, we've kind of graduated all of the historic executives out of the industry through severances and layoffs. And now it's really the people that are running the show have like 10 to 20 years experience, right? All of these 30, 40-year guys are out of the game. I suspect there's been a slower transition out for nuclear, but I want to talk about the young people specifically in the industry. Are people energized to work in it? Who are some of these influencers? Give the audience perspective.
Yeah, so it's a really exciting time in the nuclear energy industry right now. So we're talking about Vogtle just came online, which is the first new build in decades in the States, right? We had Watts Bar, which they finished in Tennessee in about 10 years ago or so, 5 to 10 years ago. But that they had started, back in the 90s. And so Vogtle is the first new build in decades. And so they just started up and put electricity on the grid over the weekend, I believe, was their actual sync to grid date. And so that's really exciting. And then we have SMRs, which are small modular reactors, micro reactors. We have so many different designs out there right now. So we're looking at GE Hitachi is building, has a contract to build the first SMR in North America. That's a combined project with OPG, Ontario Power Generation, which is the utility in Canada. So that's really exciting. We have the ARDP program with the Department of Energy. So that's the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program. So they're focused on 2 designs, and a few other designs are also receiving support through that. But the main 2 are X Energy and Natrium. So Natrium is the company is TerraPower, which is actually one of the main funders for that is Bill Gates. And so they're working on advanced nuclear. And so there's just so many exciting projects going on. And I think we are poised with the Inflation Reduction Act that occurred last summer. You know, we're poised that public sentiment for nuclear is really growing. There's financial incentives, there's public-private partnerships. So there's a lot going on in nuclear right now that, let's not call it a renaissance, because we call it a renaissance. That did not happen in the 2010, right? So a rebirth. I don't know. Yeah. We need to come up with something. But nuclear right now, super exciting time. And
the big projects that you mentioned, I think are exciting for young people. These sound daunting and they make headlines and they're going to be awesome new reactors. But if you go to these companies' job pages, like they're hiring like crazy. And when I've spoken to people in those organizations or in any new reactor developer company, they need people. They need smart, talented, good engineers, regulatory people, project managers. I mean, everything, you know? And so if you're a young person, you want to be involved in building something new and cool. Like there's just a ton of opportunity now.
Yes,
does that align with your perspective?
Yes, for sure. So there is so much talent that they are trying to onboard in nuclear utilities, support with the vendors and engineering services, but also in that new nuclear realm. Very exciting time. And so it's a great time to join the nuclear industry.
So how does somebody be an advocate for the industry? You know, you mentioned Miss America and Isodope. These are 2 renowned influencers now. But how does a lay person become a advocate for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one of the key ways to be a nuclear advocate is to just have that conversation with other people. So you don't have to be an influencer on TikTok like Isodope. So she's from Brazil, she's a model, and then she kind of took a pivot where she is just super passionate about nuclear energy just as a solution to climate change. And then Miss America, we mentioned her. So she's a nuclear engineering student who then was involved in pageants and was crowned Miss America. So she's using her platform to really focus on nuclear as a clean energy technology. But you don't have to be at that level, right? There's lots of different ways you can do it. So just talking to people, I think, you know, grocery store, Uber driver, you know, at your yoga class, whatever, but asking people about nuclear, it's something that I do often is, you know, like, what do you do? I'm a nuclear engineer. Okay, let's talk about it, because that often brings up their fears, and just listening to their concerns and trying to provide some counterpoints is great. You can also online, there's a lot of different factoids out there, right? Infographic that you can repost from the Department of Energy, from NAYGN, from Generation Atomic. Some of these groups, they will have infographics that you can then share, and you're reaching new audiences that way as well. So it's really just making nuclear less of a taboo subject and something to chat about. I think a lot of people are associating nuclear with negative items. So whether it be the atomic bombs or whether it be, you know, Godzilla, radiation, that kind of thing, but just providing nuclear facts in a positive light. I think that's a good way to introduce more and more people to the benefits of nuclear energy and nuclear technology.
Awesome. I love that answer. Well, I feel like we've covered or hit the key points for NAYGN. Is there anything else that you wanted to say about the organization? And then I'm going to ask you the hard questions. So.
Okay. All right. Well, so NAYGN, again, you don't have to be a certain age to join, even though it says Young Gen in the title. We welcome everyone in nuclear technology or just an advocate and a supporter of nuclear. So please sign up online. Again, it's free to register, and there's lots of cool activities that you can get involved in.
Yeah. Okay. I want your perspective on Alara, give kind of a background on what it is. And this is me coming from the outside the nuclear industry. And when I discovered Alara and what it was, it felt very limiting. So I want to know, is it still appropriate? Or is it not making nuclear competitive?
Yeah. Okay. You did go to the hard questions. I like it. Please stop me if I get too technical. But yes, this is, I can get on my soapbox on this one. So Alara, what is it? As low as reasonably achievable. So what are we talking about? Radiation exposure. So when you're in an industrial facility and when you're in a nuclear power plant, they set limits in terms of how much radiation you can get. And so this dates back decades. I want to say the 60s is when this principle was introduced. And what they were going for here, are you familiar with LNT?
Linear no threshold.
Okay. Okay, cool. That's where I'm going.
Right. Everyone agrees at a certain point, radiation is very dangerous and it will kill you. Sit out in the sun too long and you get skin cancer.
Yes. So there's this concept that high amounts of radiation result in cancer. And so they came up with this relationship where it was linear, that high amounts of radiation result in cancer, and that there is evidence to support that. And then they kind of extrapolated. And so they said, okay, even small amounts, so linear, and then no threshold. So no amount of radiation is safe. Thus, we come up with this catchy phrase, ALARA, which is as low as reasonably achievable. So, no radiation, the best, but we got very limited amounts of radiation. So what this looks like in the industry is when we have an outage, we are tracking everybody's radiation, and we sum it all up and we have metrics and KPIs, key performance indicators, that are all centered around this concept of as low as reasonably achievable. Now, does the data support that? So math and science background, when you have data in one area, so at high levels of radiation, does it make sense to extrapolate beyond that? Not always, right? And so it's a very conservative approach. And if you look at low radiation studies, there's some indication that it's actually the opposite effect. So some radiation can actually result in a lower cancer rate. Now, why? The reason, you kind of have to understand the mechanics of how radiation can cause cancer, right? So radiation is energized particles. You are hit with energized particles all the time, right? You breathe radioactive air, you live in a radioactive world. You have evolved to deal with radiation, right? So it's natural, it's part of your environment. The energized particle can knock out some of your, right? You have a double helix DNA, right? So it could knock out one of those pairs. Not a problem, because we all remember from biology that the pairs, so what is it, ATGC, if I'm remembering correctly, they know what their partner should be, right? So that's the idea. So your body primes to recover from all these thousands of particles that are hitting you every minute. Now the problem is if you are hit with, so maybe you take out two at once, and then the DNA strand gets a little discombobulated, we'll say, or there's an incorrect substitution. So pretty rare. And in that case, the cell could fly, so that would be cancer, or it could die off. And so, but your body, if it starts multiplying, your body is also trained to recognize that and then cut off that cell. So it would attack its own cell and you'd be fine, right? So there is some indication that it's called the hormesis theory, but if you are exposed to some low levels of radiation, your body actually has a increased efficiency in identifying those cells and find the precancerous cells.
Would a metaphor be roll in the dirt as a kid so that your immune system's strengthened?
Yeah. Or vaccines or something like exposure to something so that your body can fight it off.
Hazards, yeah. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yes. So there is some data that supports this. And so that's why a lot of us with a nuclear engineering background, when Alara comes up, it's one of those like, maybe not the best thing.
It's made the industry be too safe and therefore too expensive, which has limited new construction and innovation, which has then motivated using other more dangerous types of energy and has actually resulted in more deaths. So from a secondary tier, right, like we're trying to make it so safe that we're not using the technology that's best. And so we're actually killing more people.
Yeah. So there's such a thing as being too conservative. And Alara would potentially fall into that principle. For the layperson, I can provide just a little bit more background. So the average adult, there's about somewhere in the 30s% of cancer at some point in your life, right? And so radiation is a very weak carcinogen, and so teasing out, was this cancer caused by a small amount of radiation exposure? It is very difficult to say, right? And so we look at large populations and we're trying to trace those cancers to an exposure. Again, the conclusion is radiation is a weak carcinogen. There are certain circumstances where you can actually say like this specific cancer was tied to a radiation release, but in general, again, it's radiation is natural. It's all around us. The amount of radiation you get from living next to a nuclear power plant, you actually get more from eating a banana. So you could live next to a nuclear power plant for a year, or you could eat a banana, same amount, like actually more from the banana. So there is this like connection between anything nuclear technology specific. Oh, there's a radiation risk there. But in reality, coal plants give off more radiation than nuclear power plants because they're taking
emitting particulate matter that they're lighting on fire, and there's residual uranium and other radioactive materials in it.
Exactly. And so there's radiation from so many different sources that aren't nuclear, but people don't seem as concerned about that. So it's one of those things where it's tough. And I think Alara at this point is outdated, and I think it's obviously the industry standard, and so it's going to take a lot of intentional thought to kind of change track and
let's do it. We're the young people, right? We can change this. Yeah. Let's fix it.
I'm all about it. So I did attend a hearing on this topic. It was a couple years back. It was a Senate hearing on it, but it's at least being discussed. And at a minimum, we need to focus more on that low dose radiation research and be able to say, hey, this is supporting this change in the industry and supporting the change in the federal regulations.
So we're coming up on our time. So last question. If we had to build more nuclear tomorrow, what's one thing that we could do to move towards even more?
Building even more. All right. Well, we talked about one resource, people. So we need the talent. We need the STEM people, engineers to make this happen. That is really a focus. I get asked that all the time as president of NAYGN. That is the number one thing.
Where are the people? How can we find more people?
Yes. So I have presented on this to NSIAC, which is the Nuclear Strategic Initiatives Advisory Council. So that's all the chief nuclear officers in the United States. They want to know. I talked at the INPO, Institute of Nuclear Power Operations CEO conference. So all the utilities who have nuclear power plants, their CEOs attend this conference. And that's what I was there talking about, right? So that is what people are concerned about in the next 1 to 2 decades is, do we have enough people? But other than that, I really do think it's an exciting time. There's a lot of pressure on the existing projects. So there's so much pressure on Vogtle, right? They were over budget. They were past they missed some deadlines, but they came online, and I am so happy that Southern stuck with it and finished it. And so now they're going to have two reactors. So the Vogtle 3 started up, Vogtle 4 will be soon connected to the grid. And they're going to have those reactors for 60, 80 years. And that is so much clean energy for that amount of time. So there is a little bit
the LCOE calculation with a 20-year time horizon, like most renewable projects, then it looks terrible. But when you extend it to 80 or 100 years, then it's like, oh, this makes total sense.
Yes.
And if you look at the system cost, like systems level energy, then it's actually pretty cheap.
Yes. So there is a lot of that. You have to have a little bit of faith that it's going to come through, and it's a huge upfront capital cost compared to, let's just plop on, some windmills and blah, blah, blah. But the payoffs in the long run are absolutely massive. Yeah. And so we're talking about 20-year time frames out to 80-year time frames, right? So windmills only last, like that would be the extent of their lifetime, is, more like the 15 to 20-year time frame. And the same with solar panels, right? And so then you're rebuilding that infrastructure, whereas nuclear, you're set for decades to come. So it's really a long-term game plan.
I like it. If we want to build more, though, we need the right people. So that's what I heard. Yeah, I like it. Amanda, thanks so much for your time. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.